For the longest time, I never had a good group of friends. At the age of 11, I left my entire childhood behind when I moved 100 miles away, and that made the start of high school pretty brutal. You know the stereotype of the kid who has nowhere to go at lunch, so he hangs out in the bathroom cubicle? That was me for like 2 years. I had close to zero friends, and my only objective was to keep my head down and avoid getting picked on. Now eventually I found some people to chill with, and in a perfect world the problems would have stopped there. But bro, this friend group had me missing the bathroom stalls. If you went to school in the UK, then you'll know what I'm talking about, because this is what groups are like here. People will say anything. It could be the most evil, malicious thing you could think of. People will say it if they think it's going to get them a laugh. If you have even the slightest insecurity about the way you look or the way you talk or things that you weren't even aware of, someone will use it against you. And the only way to stop it from happening to you is to make someone else the target. And you just end up in this cycle of broken people abusing and dragging each other down to the same miserable level. And the worst part is, if you react to it, suddenly you're the guy who can't take a joke. You know, you start questioning yourself. Am I just overreacting? When if someone makes a joke about your mum or someone you love, naturally you're going to want to smack them. Like, that's a normal reaction. But because I was so desperate for friends at the time, I stuck with them for years. And I remember the one time when the reality of this situation hit me like a ton of bricks. It was this occasion when we were all meeting up outside of school, the entire group, and we were going to go and watch Deadpool 2 at the cinema, which had just come out at the time and happened to be a film I'd already seen. They wanted to watch it, so I thought, you know, it, I'll come along. So I arrived at the cinema at the time we were all supposed to meet at, and none of them were there yet. Surprise, surprise, they're just running late. So I went up to the desk, I bought my ticket and waited around for a while longer. And then out of the blue, I got a text from one of them. It said, "I've just woken up, we're gonna go later." Bear in mind this was probably about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd already spent time traveling to the cinema and I'd already bought my ticket, which was non-refundable. So as I sat in this empty cinema, watching a film I'd already seen, I remember thinking in that moment, nobody gives a about me. This is probably the loneliest I've ever felt in my whole life. So I'm about 5 or 6 years on from that now, and fortunately a lot's changed. By some divine miracle, I found my way out of that group, and I now have a reliable group of friends that I can trust when shit hits the fan. And because of the experiences I went through at school, naturally when I went to university I was determined not to make the same mistakes, and my standards in terms of what I tolerate from people went up, even if that meant doing the uncomfortable thing at times and going through bouts of loneliness to preserve that standard. So what I'm about to say might be quite obvious to a lot of you, but at the same time it was not obvious at all to the younger version of myself. There are some people out there who do not deserve your friendship, and I think these types of people are quite easy to spot. It's the ones who will put others down to get a laugh out of the rest of the group. It's the ones who have quite self-destructive habits and also encourage you to partake in those same habits. There's just some people who are way too fucking negative. So if you fall below that standard, then for me, you're not worth my time. Some stupid people, to be honest, would call that arrogant. But think about it. If you take any old friend that you can get, regardless of whether or not they are of good character, regardless of whether you share any of the same values or have any single thing in common, that's probably a symptom of low self-esteem. It's you convincing yourself that you don't deserve better, that you can't do any better than that. And I'm here to tell you, you deserve that and a lot more. But high standards or not, finding a good group of friends can be a challenge. And to be honest with you, it's still a challenge that I'm facing today. I told you that I did go off and make a good group of friends that I trust towards the end of my school days. But my particular problem now is that we've all gotten older and moved to different parts of the country. One of them is literally living in Canada. Unfortunately, I am still used to feelings of loneliness from time to time. I think in self-improvement we glorify the idea of the lone wolf and the Sigma. Like, there are these moments where I'm walking around town listening to music on my main character shit, feeling like this is my monk mode arc. But then I have this realization that actually I'm all alone. I really am just a bit of a lonely sometimes. And to tell you what my life really looks like, I'm generally not around a lot of people. Last year I left university for good. I also broke up with my girlfriend of 2 years, and I'm just putting in about 10 times more time into my side projects like YouTube. So just over a period of time, I've gone from seeing quite a lot of people to not so many people at all. And in all fairness, those have all been decisions of my own making. So I'll be honest, if you clicked on this video expecting me to be the guy with 100 friends and some amazing social life, going to parties every night, unfortunately, that's not the case. I've known people who seem to have all the friends, but if you look a little bit closer, those relationships are actually a mile wide and an inch deep. I'm the type of person who'd always prefer to have one lifelong friend over 100 shithead shallow friends. But at the same time, we don't have to suffer. I don't think I personally ever expected to be in this situation because of my own decisions, because back in the day, it wasn't a choice. I had to just take whatever friends I could get. But it has reminded me of all those times in the past where I really struggled to form quality friendships. And it's made me realise that even if I'm on my solo grind or whatever, it's not something I can afford to neglect. So I wanted to make this video today to share what I've been doing recently to offset the loneliness and get back to having a rewarding, fulfilling social life. And you can think of it as a journey that we're going on together. So leading on to the first point that I don't know how many people will be able to relate to, but for me, because of those terrible experiences that I had with friends throughout school and how much it tanked my self-esteem and the fact that it led me to develop such a scarcity mindset around friends, I've now kind of pulled a complete 180 from that in the last few years, and now I'm extremely selective with who I choose to spend time with. Because like I said, I think you should expect a lot of your friends, you should hold them to a high standard, but there were some unforeseen consequences. So I'll tell you the way that I see people of my own age. I'm 22 years old, just to fill you in on that, but I look at them and I see a bunch of unserious people without any real goals or direction, not particularly happy or fulfilled with life, and coping with that by going out and getting faced on the weekend, because that's actually quite a big deal over here. There is a massive drinking culture, not just my country but a lot of other countries, and don't get me wrong, I can enjoy it from time to time. I have been known to enjoy it in the past, but I'll put it this way, when absolutely everyone drinks, they all go out drinking in these big groups, they just associate together. And from the outside, it looks fun. It looks like they're having the best time in the world, but having been part of that with so many groups, I very quickly realised it's not everything it's cracked up to be. I actually found that drinking is more or less the only thing that they have in common. That's just the thing that they meet up to do. When it comes down to it, they can't rely on each other. They don't actually know each other that well. They're not really friends, they're drinking buddies. So I used to go out with groups like that all the time, and I would find it very difficult to make even small talk. Like, all these guys just wanted to talk about football. Like, did you watch the game? And I'm just not one of those guys. I'm not going to watch the football game with the lads. I kind of resent that part of English culture. So I just didn't feel like I could relate to them. But then I had this realization, which was quite important. This is the reason why I don't have anyone to hang out with. I'm walking into a room full of people who I don't even know, and I am projecting my worldview onto them. And sure, it's a worldview that has been shaped by degenerate people from my past. But this isn't the past, this is right now. This is a new group of people, some of whom I'm yet to even speak to, and I'm already passing final judgment on them. What does that make me? By going in with this mindset of, oh, I can't relate to any of you, I'm effectively shooting myself in the foot. I'm sealing off any chance of a connection that I could make. And sure, there will always be some people who I'm not going to end up best friends with. That's not the expectation going into these things. You don't have to be best friends with everyone. But how do I know that if I'm not making the effort to get to know them first? Let me give you some absolute sage advice. If you want to make a lot of friends, all you have to do is show genuine interest in people. Treat every single interaction you have with someone as if it's this mission where the only objective is to learn as much as you possibly can about that person. And do you know why this always works? Do you know why time and time again I've had success using this method? It's because people love talking about themselves. If you show them that you're genuinely curious about them, if you ask them open-ended questions, if you don't always look to make yourself the focus of the conversation, if you can show them that you are present and engaged and listening to what they are saying, they will think the world of you. Now I know it does take some confidence to approach someone and introduce yourself, but I find that as soon as you get onto the subject of them, from there it's an easy ride. It all comes down to showing genuine interest in that person. Not looking disinterested, not looking like you don't want to be there or you're not listening, but by showing them that you are engaged and appreciative of this conversation you're currently in. And that's why I had to learn that to change my situation, I have to invest in other people and those relationships. Sure, if people want to talk about football, that might not be my favourite topic of conversation, but what's stopping me from putting the bare minimum amount of effort in and learning just a little bit about football, enough to entertain a conversation, not like every single fucking autistic detail about football, but just enough to hold a conversation, which is what I did And surprisingly, I actually enjoy football right now, which could happen to you. And this doesn't just apply to social settings. You ideally need to be striking up conversations everywhere you go. The old man walking the dog, the guys in the gym, the supermarket lady. Just practice on them. Show curiosity. Just find out whatever you can about them, and you'll very quickly get good at talking to people. Which kind of leads me on to my next point. I feel like these videos always give quite generic advice about where to find these friends. Like, here are the top 5 places to meet people. Number 1, the coffee shop. Number 2, cooking class. And sure, you probably could meet people there, but if you have a normal routine and you're working in the week, you're kind of having to go out of your way to do these things and go to these places, and to me it just seems a little bit forced. I'm not hating, because some people will have found success doing things like these, but I think there's a better way. If I were to give you a list of places to meet people, I think you get into the habit of ignoring those opportunities that come about in your day-to-day. Like, you may or may not have experienced this before, but you're going about your day, just getting on with some other stuff, and you just strike up random conversations that you didn't necessarily plan for. You know what I mean? Like, you can be waiting in the line and you crack a few jokes with the guy next to you. And I think it's these random spontaneous interactions in everyday settings that, in my experience, can turn into some of the best, most genuine conversations. So I get that it might sound a little bit weird that your typical friendship probably doesn't start this way, but why the fuck not? You got to keep an open mind. You got to try new things. Personally, I've made quite a few friends this way, and to me it's more authentic than purposely showing up at some place or doing some kind of activity that's just going to overshadow the social aspect. And you also might be thinking, I barely get into these types of conversations, so this doesn't seem particularly viable for me. And I'm not going to lie to you when I say that the majority of times this has happened to me, I've been the one to initiate the conversation. But that's all part of building a solid foundation of social skills. It's about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, of approaching people that you don't know or you don't know that well, and having these spontaneous interactions. Now, of course, the other person does have to be open to it. Occasionally you will get these miserable f***s who just don't want to have a conversation and who are a bit rude unnecessarily. But don't let that put you off. I'd say 9 times out of 10, if you go up to a stranger and compliment them on the way they look or something they're wearing, they're not just going to blank you. It's probably going to lead to some kind of conversation. Like I said, I have made some genuinely good friends recently from doing this, and I think the main reason people overlook this method of making friends is because they think it's too weird or too soon to ask someone they just met for their details. So I'm going to give you an example of one of my random encounters. So it was actually a job interview. It was actually a group interview. So there were 4 of us in the room with the employer answering questions and basically competing for the same job. So to cut a long story short, I and 2 of the other guys failed the test in like the first 10 minutes and got kicked out of the interview. The CEO was a dickhead. So we exited the building and one of these guys was pissed off. He just went off on his own in an angry mood, leaving me with this other guy. And he suggested that we go and grab a coffee because his train doesn't come for another half an hour. I agreed, and we ended up bonding over the ridiculousness of the situation. We both agreed that it was a funny thing to happen. We'd never been kicked out of an interview before, and we ended up bonding over our shared creative kind of side hobbies. He was quite into his music, and obviously I'm on the content grind. So in this instance, I did get his Instagram. I suggested that if he was ever in town, we should hang out again. But for whatever reason, some time passed and it just didn't end up happening. I didn't message him, he didn't message me. I was still viewing his Instagram stories and his posts. He was still very much in the back of my mind. But I had this irrational fear it would just be a bit weird if we were to meet up again. You know, we only got to know each other for about half an hour. And then enough time from that moment passed that I thought if I message this guy again, he might not even remember who I am. So I left it there, which is incredibly stupid and self-defeating of me. But then just a couple of months later, I bumped into this guy again, and of course he remembered who I was. He even remembered some small details about that conversation we'd had way back when. So we had a little bit of a catch up, but we were both in a hurry. So we went our separate ways. And about 10 minutes later, I thought to myself, I've just done it again. I could have took that opportunity then and there to set some kind of meetup. So I literally just got out my phone then and texted him, are you free this weekend? We went out and got a coffee, and we've hung out countless times since. It is literally that easy. You don't need to worry about whether it's too early or not. You shouldn't be worried about not knowing them particularly well, because that's literally the f***ing point. You are arranging a meetup to get to know them better. You need to kill off this socially anxious, indecisive little version of yourself and realize that most people will be flattered you're giving them the time of day, because they don't get that from most people. Our society is so very closed off and antisocial that, just like the last point, you can do a lot for someone just by listening to them and making them feel important. So to reiterate, be spontaneous, take advantage of those opportunities that you get in your day-to-day to have those conversations, and if you feel like you made some kind of connection, follow up immediately by getting their details and then arranging some kind of meetup in the future. So on to the final point, which is kind of a bonus piece of advice, something that when I was sitting down to write this video came into my head and I found quite interesting. It's to do with our expectations surrounding friends. I think if you're someone without a lot of friends, the dream is often going to be to have this big group of friends, this big extended circle. Well, not even that, it could just be a smaller circle, but a very close one. A group of friends that does everything together and laughs and has a good time. Now, there are some people who do have that type of relationship with their friends. I'm not trying to say that's inaccessible to everyone, because it all depends on the people. I've been in some friend groups where I'm very close with everyone. I have a very good relationship with each member of the group. And I've been in some groups where I actively dislike one or two people. But in my opinion, friend groups are not all they're cracked up to be. And I know you're probably thinking, I'm only saying that because my friend group is all scattered around the country and I don't get to see them very often. And you'd be right, but on that note, I actually think that's somewhat inevitable. It might have happened to me sooner than most people at the age of 22, but think about it. As you go through life, especially as you get older, you're not particularly likely to stay in the same place, are you? There'll be certain opportunities, things to do, places to see. People just naturally come and go, and over the years, the childhood friend group just grows further and further apart. And I think that's kind of a depressing thing for most people to talk about. But I want to stress that it doesn't mean you're not friends anymore. It doesn't mean that you're not close. I think, if anything, it's the opposite. If you already have that strong bond, it doesn't matter if you don't see each other or talk for a couple of years. You still feel the same way about the other person. You're still going to be there if they need you, and then vice versa. But I also think it's a natural part of life to just lose touch with certain people. I think we have this idealized version of friend groups from films where everyone's best friends forever, and if you're not going out every week or you're falling short of that in some way, then you can feel a bit shit. But I'm proposing something a little bit different, which has been working quite well for me, especially considering that my core friend group don't live anywhere near me anymore. And that's hanging out one-on-one with someone else. Now that might sound quite simple, but I don't think we do this enough. The drinking buddies don't do this. They can't hang out with each other one-on-one because that requires them to actually get to know each other and work on their connection. Because I think it's a much better way to create those high quality relationships. If you've been working on steps 1 and 2, you'll not only have the skills to talk with someone one-on-one, but you'll also be in the habit of setting those meetups to go and grab a coffee or hit a gym session. I'd say try and get in at least 2 of those a week. It might not be everyone's picture perfect idea of a social life, but for someone like me who holds my time in quite high regard, it's been a good solution. When you're in a situation where you've had a busy week, which you should be having, because you should be working hard in your free time, but you know that for your mental health, you probably need to get some social connection. It can be more convenient to meet up one-on-one with someone casually rather than going for the whole night out and getting blitzed and waking up with the hangover. And if it's a reliable group of friends that you're really after, if that's the thing that you thought about and you really want, a lot can come from just one person. Because think about it, when you're making an entirely new group of friends, you don't just know all of them automatically. You're usually introduced to that larger group by one of the people who's already in the group. So don't rule out those one-on-one meetups and following up on those spontaneous conversations, because you never really know where they're going to lead. Now, I appreciate you for sticking around this long. This has been a more candid style of video, but if you take action on the things I've taught you in this video, I have 100% faith that you'll find your people. Take care, bro.